In this episode of Grieve in Common, we mention death and talk about grief throughout. Hi guys, it's Nell. Welcome back to season 2 of Grieve in Common with Winston Swish. I'm literally so excited to be here. This is my ultimate dream. I'm so excited to be joined with Amie from the If We Don't Laugh We'll Cry podcast, which I'm sure all of my friends listening to this know that it is my lifeline. So I would just like to introduce Amie.
Hi, that is so cute. Your lifeline. Don't give me that much credit. You've done most of it, all of it on your own. But hi guys, I'm really excited to be here. This is my first ever podcast as a guest. So thank you so much for having me.
That is so exciting.
I know, I'm so excited. I'm one half of the podcast If We Don't Laugh We'll Cry. The other half is my younger sister Alicia. I showed Nell a picture of her earlier, but she's got an eye infection, so she can't be joining us today. She doesn't want you guys
She didn't show me, it's fine.
Oh yeah, I didn't show you. That was supposed to be a secret. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I basically started the podcast with my sister to normalise the conversation around grief, because obviously it can be very isolating. I'm sure everyone listening can relate to that. And it kind of came from a random day in the park with Alicia. I don't know if you actually know this now. I don't know if I've said this before, but it just came from a day in the park with my sister where we hadn't actually spoken about our grief for like 4 years, really in detail. So then we just sat at the park and we just spoke about it basically. And then we realised how good it felt to actually just let it out. And we also realised that we have a lot of stuff that people can relate to and that probably find useful. So we thought, why don't we start a podcast? And that's exactly what we did.
As you should. It's an amazing podcast, guys. Please go and listen to it. I'm set little reminders on my phone when new ones are coming out. I love it.
Oh, well, that's nice. You must be patient because it takes a while for us to get a podcast episode out. But yeah,
I have no consistency in my life, so it's reassuring. And it's really nice.
That's grief.
Yeah, you have a similar relationship to me and my sister, so I think it's nice to watch and to listen back to. So it's a really nice, comforting, funny listen. So today we were going to kind of have a bit of a chat through a couple of topics. First of all, we're going to kind of chat about uni, life after uni, schooling when you're grieving, which I know is a topic lots of people find really tough and is a big one, I think, with a lot of young grievers. And also just advocating grief, normalising it, talking about it, which is obviously a lot of what you do, which is incredible work. So thank you. And just chatting through that, asking what that's like and stuff. So for a bit of background, I know I talked about this on another podcast. I think it was, I don't know which episode it was, sorry, but yeah, go listen to it because it was a good episode. But my dad died when I was 21, so last year. So for me, the life after uni is obviously completely within my grief, whereas my siblings are younger, so that was all different for them.
What's the age difference?
So this is going to really test if I know how old my sibling. I'm 22, my brother is 19, and my sister is just turned 17.
Right. Me and my sister is 4 years, so that's kind of similar.
That is similar. That is crazy. Yeah, so I thought we could start off by talking about graduation first, because my dad's funeral was the day before my graduation. What a story. No. I know. When the people got back to us with the date, I was like, okay, right, awesome, great. I woke up hungover to go to my graduation from my dad's funeral, which was a bit of a weird one. And obviously, it's a day, I think, incorporated with families, and it's about your parents watching you do something really cool.
Yeah.
So how did you find graduation?
Well, I mean, my graduation was weird for a whole lot of reasons, but mainly because of the one you just described about how it's a day of celebration. You look around and everyone's with their parents and they're getting the pick with the gown and the cap, the pick with both the parents. I was like, I hate everyone who got that pick. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, literally.
But I actually had a interesting experience with my graduation. So because of the loss of my mum, I wasn't really... Following the loss of my mum, I lost my best friend at the year after. So I lost my mum in first year and then lost my best friend in second year. And so third year was a whirlwind. I was just like full suppression mode, not really thinking. And I missed the graduation deadline to apply for it. And they wouldn't let me graduate. And yeah, so, oh, do you see that? Why is it also doing thumbs up when I'm talking about death? For anyone who can't see us, can only hear us, I just talked about death and Zoom put an emoji of a thumbs up on the screen.
That is so mad.
Anyway, so they wouldn't let me graduate and my dad started this whole online campaign. And anyway, on the day of graduation, I just turned up and I was like, I'm going to just get the pick anyway. Not the pick, but a pick.
Not the pick.
Not the pick. And then I went up to the desk, I was like, I'll just try it. I was like, can I graduate? And this random volunteer was like, yeah, sure, we'll add you on at the end. So like, I literally wasn't meant to graduate because I'd forgotten to sign up because of grief. And then a random volunteer just got me on the end. So I managed to do it. And I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but like, because everyone in my year knew that I wasn't meant to graduate, like everyone was just like, I felt like Adele at Wembley when I walked out. I literally was like, oh my God, I'm a celebrity. Other than like it being a sad, griefy day, it was just made so much worse because I didn't even know if all the hard work I did was going to pay off. But I fully relate to how hard it is with everyone being around with their parents and stuff and going for that meal and like, you just want that hug.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it.
I think, yeah. There are some moments in your life, I think, that really magnify the bigger picture. And I think like big milestones are definitely one of them. And I think graduation
100%.
was my first milestone, but it was so fresh. So I was there
going to say, that is in like a day is too
Yeah, it was really
short.
tough.
Bless you. I wish I could give you a hug, virtual hug. I was going to say as well so obviously I had my graduation, which was full of drama, but then my sister had her graduation. That was much further from losing our mum. But weirdly enough, so I said how I lost my best friend a year after losing my mum. When my sister turned 21, which was the age I was when I lost my best friend, Alicia lost her best friend too. So, and that was just before basically her graduation. So that graduation day was full, I'm sure, as many like similar emotions to how you felt because it was so fresh. And also her friends should have been there with her graduating. And honestly, babes, I cried so much that I was sick everywhere. Like I was so emotional. But it's so hard. Milestones like that are so hard, and like birthdays as well, like where they should be there and they're not. It's so hard.
Yeah, I think it's that frustration of like, they should be seeing me do this. And I think especially with the graduation, because it's such an achievement as well. And you're like,
yeah,
oh my God, like I did it. But then they're not seeing you do that. So I think it can almost like invalidate the completion slightly when you're just
100%.
You don't feel that like there's really much worth celebrating.
I give myself comfort when I reach milestones and stuff by thinking like they do know, like they're aware of what we've done. Like they can see everything. That sort of, obviously people believe different things, but like I like to tell myself that my mum knows all the good stuff and like she is kind of here with me. And I think for anyone that's got those milestones coming up, like that's all you can really do to provide yourself with comfort is just tell yourself that they are proud of you and they know, and like it's still worth celebrating. Uni for me was like, I used it as full suppression mode. So I didn't really, obviously wasn't aware at the time what I was doing, but I just went straight back to uni. I always kind of start with the anecdote of like, I was in a dance society at uni and I got the role of Ham the Pig in Toy Story, right? I was buzzing. And then obviously I lost mum and they were like, oh, if you don't come in, we're going to take the role off you. And I was like, this is a society, not even uni. And I was like, I'm coming in. I got my pig nose. I got my tap shoes. I went and my dad drove me. My dad drove me from Leicester to Manchester every week and back for like months for me to be in this stupid dance show. And then I was just tapping away, like pretending nothing had happened with a pig nose on. Like, it's so mad, the things that you do in your grief. I was lucky enough. I think this is, like, I say lucky. wouldn't go that far, but I was lucky in the way that I had just moved to uni and I'd created a new life for myself. So like I already had that as a kind of escapism from home. So when it was like, when I had the chance to go back to Manchester, it was like, yeah, I'm going to take it because I don't want to be in the reality of it at home in Leicester, which my sister did. And that was hard. And we'll go into like schools and uni, making it harder.
Yeah, literally. Like I'd obviously just moved out of third year and I went to uni in Nottingham, so not far from Leicester. And any chance I could get to go back, like I didn't have a house there anymore, but literally I was just like, get me on a train. Like I don't care. Like get me out of that little like horrible bubble that you're in, which at the time is really comforting, but is also so suffocating. And like you said, it's like where the grief happened. So that can be really like, it's awful to be in. And yeah, like my siblings had the same thing. They hadn't moved out yet and established like friends and distance from home. So like, God, I think it was also like I'd established that relationship away from my parents, whereas they had never lived without them. So I think that probably made it a really different situation.
Exactly the same with me.
It's just like schools, I think, is where I've had so many like grief horror stories from schools. Honestly,
and it's like
it's so mad.
You're treated like just a number, like across all institutions, whether it's school or uni. I think or workplace, I guess. Like when you need support, sometimes you can be reminded with like the harsh reality of like you are just a number and you are replaceable. And like in school, especially, like I had to. So Alicia was similar to your siblings in the way that she was at home and she hadn't had the chance to move out, and she had to go and do her GCSEs, and like they were basically saying that she's going to fail. She will fail them, even though she was predicted A's. And like I just remember like it was all, I'm sure you can relate, a bit of a blur. Like I can't really remember much, but I remember storming into the school and being the parent and being like, right, listen, like she's predicted A's and you're telling her. Like I was just like shouting at this teacher, and I look back, I was like, go on. But at the time, it's just so frustrating because you're like, I need support and you're giving me the opposite. You're actually making this harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, literally. I remember just like my sister had sent me some like voice note about something, like sobbing, bless her, about something her teacher had said. And I remember just being like, I'm literally coming into the school right now. I'm going to come and set up this meeting. And she was like, no, you're going to embarrass me. And I was like, no, I'm coming in.
So you're the oldest?
Yes, yeah, I'm the oldest. Yeah. It's a tough gig, but...
Babe.
My sister puts me through hell and back. Aside from the whole dead dad, but that made it worse.
Yeah, me too. I can relate. It's just like, because I don't know if you felt like you had to do this, but like taking on the parental role that was missing, like I felt that a lot. And I think that's kind of just for a lot of people who are the older siblings, or they just take on that responsibility at the beginning because it feels right. And then you're kind of stuck with that kind of responsibility, and it's hard to then set the boundaries to remove yourself and be like, right, I actually am still that grieving child that needs help too. Like if I'm helping everyone who is like helping me, I think I struggle with that.
Yeah, I so agree with that. Like I think at the time it's like you're in crisis mode and you're like, oh, I have to look after all of these like younger people, and then suddenly it's like a year later and you're like, guys, actually like my dad also died, or
yes,
like, whoever. Yeah, and it's like actually like just because I'm 2 years older doesn't mean that it's not. Yeah, so I think sometimes older siblings can take the brunt of stuff like that.
Agree. Hard relate.
But it's also, I find it very rewarding. Like whenever my sister comes and gives me a hug, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm doing a good job. Obviously some people don't move back home after uni, but I sort of had to. And it was suddenly like my whole life within 6 weeks had completely turned on its head, and graduation was like the last day of normality for me, and then it was like straight back to where it had all happened. So I think stuff like leaving uni often means going back home because it's hard to afford to not be at home.
Yeah. Regardless, like people who have had to go home after uni, regardless of loss or grief, like they hate it. So I can fully like sympathize with you. Like that must have been really, really hard for you to have had that life and then been able to go away from it, and then you were kind of forced back into it, I guess. And that's really tough, especially when it's just down to finance. Like that's really unfair.
Yeah, or it's just like really being thrown in the deep end of it, I guess. But like also I think it's nice because it means that like you're at home with your siblings and you're, you know, I live like a much quieter life at home than I did at uni. Nice in the countryside, which is lovely. But yeah, I think like, yeah, it's sweet actually with my dog, so that's always lovely.
I don't think there's ever really an ideal situation when it comes to grief. Like, I think there's ways, obviously, that it would be better to deal with, but also, like, all of it's shit. Like,
literally.
There's, like, literally. So, like, what I mean by that is, like, I was lucky enough that I stayed in Manchester and I could distract myself. But that then meant that I didn't think about it for 4 years and I really suppressed it deeply, and then now I'm feeling it. Whereas you, I feel like from what I've heard today, it's like you got thrown right back into it and you can't really avoid it that much, which is horrible and hard, but also means that you're hopefully processing. Obviously, I don't know, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's one thing that like, using this very tenuously, I do feel grateful for, in the sense that it's like, actually I'm so forced every day to think about what's happened, and then I think like I'm a year down the line and I already feel a little bit like I'm grappling with it more than I think I would be if I was still at uni. So I think that is a good thing within the boundaries of not being that good.
I mean, you should be proud of yourself anyway. Like, you sound like a year is really not a long time, and you're literally on this podcast talking so candidly. It's actually impressive. It took me like 4 years. So well,
thank you. That is so kind. How did you find going to work after? Like, I know that obviously it was slightly later down the line for you, but like, how did you find like navigating? Because I think work's really like, a lot of the time you have to like be there every day, or you have to have like much more of like a front, I think, than you do at uni. Like if you're like serving people or talking to people, it's really emotionally demanding. So I just wondered how you found navigating that and like days off and stuff. Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, so when I got my first like proper job, and by proper I mean in the field of what I wanted to do, so I wanted to make a good impression and I wanted to show up and all of those things, I honestly like was deep in my suppression, that I just pretended like nothing really had happened. And then when I was kind of coming to terms with it a bit more, I remember in that first job they offered like a therapy session, and I was like umming and ahhing all day. I'd never had therapy. I'd never even spoken about it with my family or anything really. And I was like, right, I'll go. I forced myself to go. Sat in there for an hour talking about my friend's problems, and then in the last 5 minutes listed off all these things that had happened to me, and this woman's face was like, what? She was like, I need you to come back. And then I never went back, and I didn't go back to therapy for 2 years. So after I kind of came out of that suppression era, I got a next job, and because I was very lucky and I'm in a privileged position that I had a boss and people around me that showed me compassion, and that can't be said for a lot of places. But one thing I do remember, because moving into this next job, I was like, I want everyone to know that I've lost people without telling them. So I remember I added them all on Instagram, all my new co-workers, and then I posted a story of my mum, like, miss you always. Literally.
Genius,
but also sad that we have to, like, we feel that uncomfortable to have to do that. So luckily, my friend from work, Meg, shout out, she's an angel. She sent it into the group chat of the work colleagues without me in, and was like, I think we should all keep this in mind when Amie joins. So it was like a perfect thing for me.
That's so nice.
I know, it was so gorgeous, and she only told me that when I left like last year, and I just nearly cried. A lot of the time people don't care, and I find that really, really, really sad. But I was really lucky with mine.
Yeah, that's so nice. I think small things like that make such a difference. Like, to her it was probably quite a small act, but I think obviously, like you said, for you it really changed a lot.
Mm-hmm. What about you?
So I have a slight problem with oversharing. So like the first 2 minutes within meeting someone, I feel that I have to tell them that my dad's dead, because I avoid it coming up really. But also I think it's such a core part of who I am that I'm like, so like often before people have ever even asked me any information about myself, I'll bring up my dad in the past tense, hoping that they'll clock on. So like for me, I applied for my first job 3 months after my dad had died, and I mentioned it in the interview. I was like, I need you to know this has just happened. Like, I'm obviously like really still in the trenches, so I just like basically made it really clear to all of my colleagues to be like mindful if certain things came up.
That's amazing.
Oh,
I'm sorry, that's actually insane. Like, that's amazing. That could never be like, you probably don't even realise that's amazing, because it feels horrible to do so. But like, if I just never even thought that was an option when I was in the trenches, like seriously, it was just like ignore, pretend that it hadn't happened. That I would have never been brave enough to say like, hey, listen, this has happened to me, and this, I just need you to be aware. Like, that is really mature and impressive. To be honest.
Thank you, that is so kind.
Yeah.
I think for me, like, I think I was just constantly so scared of like, if I didn't say anything, it would come up, or like someone would be like, oh, what do your parents do? And that was when I just couldn't deal with it. So I think like for me it was literally just a coping mechanism to be like, no one say anything about dads, or, you know, I don't know, whatever it might be. So yeah, I think like having good people around you at work really just like makes all the difference.
Exactly. I think like for people who are in work and maybe doing what I was doing in the way that I was like hoping it never came up and just getting on with it. And there were times where I needed support and I didn't ask for it. I think obviously it's a privilege to be able to move jobs and stuff, but I think if you are in that position where people around you don't know, I think because it is such a huge part of your life, like I would always say, just make them aware. Now, looking back and after hearing what you've just said, like hopefully other people can be inspired to do the same. Could never have been me, but maybe if you had told me that back in the day, it would have encouraged me to do it. So hopefully that will encourage someone else to do it, because that is, yeah. And I think the same goes for friendship groups and stuff. Like, I speak to a lot of people on the podcast page, especially young people who are in friendship groups at school and stuff that they're not being supported in. And it's the same in like, there are people that will provide you with the compassion and the nurturing that you deserve. And if you're not getting that where you are currently, like, just know that they do exist, and like, you deserve that, if that makes sense. Like, that's what you deserve. And
I know it's so true. Like, that I think I learned a lot when my dad died, that people around me, some people responded in a way that I thought, I know we're going to be friends forever. And some people in my life that I thought were my forever friends never said anything really. And so we haven't really spoken since. And I think
exactly the same with me.
Yeah, I think like, I always thought that you have to have grieved to know how to approach someone that's grieving. And actually, I still wouldn't really know how to talk to someone if they came to me and said that had happened. I think sometimes it can feel a bit like, oh, actually, I don't really know what to say. But I think like most of my best friends have never lost anyone, and they're just lovely. Like, they're just nice people. So like, there are nice people that will treat you with respect and listen to you.
Exactly.
And if you don't have that at the moment, then seek it, definitely.
Yeah. And cut people off that aren't, obviously grief can be isolating. And I think what happened with me was like, I was already isolated because of grief, because it's just lonely. But so then I was like, I don't want to cut my friends off that aren't providing me with what I need, because then I'll be lonelier. But looking back, it's like, if people aren't serving you at any point in your life, it doesn't matter grief or anything, like, you should cut off people that no longer serve you or drain you. Like, you need to value yourself higher, really. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, retweet, because it's the worst thing ever. I don't know if you and your sister had the same experience, but I think for my sister, like, a lot of her friends were obviously younger, and so sometimes that emotional maturity wasn't quite there the same maybe it was with my friends. So I think she found that a lot of her friends didn't know what to say. But I think it's like important to know that you don't always need to say something that's going to change their life.
That's the thing. Listen, like, that's the thing. Like, Alicia said that as well, like, because they're at school. Like, in what world is a 16-year-old going to know what to say to a 16-year-old that's lost their parent? Like, there's no one. And also, like, any age, like, it is hard to know what to say. What I would say, if anyone's listening that's, like, doesn't know what to say to a grieving friend, it's like, you don't have to be able, like you said before, you don't have to be able to relate. Oh, thumbs up's back. Oh. Guys, the thumbs up's back. It's gone.
Where did that come from?
It's like patronising me, isn't it? It's like, yeah, good story.
Like, yeah. Cheers, bro.
But yeah, you don't have to relate to what someone's going through to help them. You don't have to say the right thing 100% of the time. Like, there's things, I always say, there's things that you definitely shouldn't say. Like, everything happens for a reason, that sort of shit. Leave that one out. But there's things like, it's better to say something than nothing. If you're a close friend.
Couldn't agree more. Even just letting you know I'm here for you. That can be it.
Yeah.
That can literally be it.
Yeah.
And then they can access your support when they think that they're ready.
Yeah, just addressing it.
Yeah, like leaving someone to come to you first when they're grieving, like that should not be how you do it. Like they should not have to seek you out as a friend. You should be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why did you and Alicia start your podcast? Which I know you've touched on in your podcast, but for people who don't know.
So when we started the podcast, we didn't think it was going to be as like fastly. When me and Alicia started the podcast, we didn't think that it would grow as fast as it has. And that's obviously bittersweet because it's like, we're happy that the community is growing because every time it grows, there's more strength in it. But then it's like, people need resources. And that's why it's bittersweet. And there's all these young people that have nowhere to go and nothing relatable online. And that's why I love you guys, because you're trying to do the same thing as us. It's just like normalizing it and getting people to talk and supporting everyone through a community. Like, that's all we wanted to do. And also, it's therapeutic for us. Like, we've realised allocating ourselves this time, just us two, to sit and chat with allocated time and allocated space to feel however we want to feel is so useful for us as well. So it's useful for everyone that listens and have said that it's helped, but also for us, it's like, because I spent so long not talking and so long suppressing, and me and Alicia spent years never talking about it, now it just feels like freeing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, one of my questions was like, can it or does it help you? So that's really nice to know that like it provides some comfort or therapy for you as well, because I know like listening to it, it does feel like a bit of a breath of fresh air. So it's nice that, because I always listen to it and I'm like, I hope that this isn't making them sad. But no, it's so nice to know that it doesn't.
No, it's like, obviously sometimes we finish recording and you feel heavy. Like, I'm sure you can understand when you do these podcasts or anything really, like, you can't really predict how it's going to make you feel after. But we always check in with each other throughout. And if it gets a bit heavy, we have a dance break. We turn off the cameras.
I was going to say.
We go outside. Yeah, we have a little break. And that's why what I said at the beginning, like, you're quite patient if you subscribe to us, because we don't do it that frequently. But it's like, when we started, we were like, we're going to film every single Wednesday. And it just wasn't sustainable. It was like, you can't put a camera on and just talk whenever, because grief literally comes when you don't want it, and it comes uninvited all the time.
I can have like a completely fine day and I'll wake up the next day and be like, whoa, okay, this is a completely different vibe to yesterday.
Yeah.
And there's no planning for that whatsoever. Sorry, this is kind of a deep question, but like, it must be difficult talking about grief on the internet. Like, I suppose it feels very vulnerable sometimes, like admitting to people, not admitting, that sounds so like you've done something wrong, but it feels like an admittance, like, oh, this happened to me.
Yeah.
Does it ever feel like that?
Yes. Not at the beginning. Like, it's so bizarre. I can't even begin to explain to you how, when we had that conversation at the park, like, it felt like we'd literally just started to unravel this massive grief ball of wool in our heads. That's how I felt anyway. And as soon as I started talking about it, I was like, oh my God, this is actually easier than I thought. It's not as scary as I thought. And me and Alicia actually laugh so much when we talk about it, because it's just like, obviously it's not funny, but some parts are just so funny. I'm sure, like, it's just like, how is this our life? I'm sure you can relate. It's just like mental.
Me and my sister are very lucky that we have a very like honest relationship, and we do make some pretty horrific jokes about everything that's happened. And it was like when I sent her, I think like the first reel you guys posted before you even did a podcast, I sent it to my sister and was like, oh my gosh, this is literally like the funniest thing I've ever heard. And I think that was like the real driving factor, was that actually like I felt like a lot of the time I'd be like, oh yeah, I'd make a joke to my friends about my dad and they'd all be like, and I was like, guys, no, like that is funny. Like, that is funny.
Please, like, you need to laugh.
Yeah, you literally have to laugh, because otherwise then I look like an idiot when I've just made some horrific joke about my dad.
Yeah.
And then it's just like radio silence, and it just makes me look like a bit of an idiot.
If your friend is making a joke about something bad that's happened to them, obviously it's a bit like, oh, are they okay? But also, if that's what they need in the moment for a bit of comic relief, give it to them.
Yeah,
Please.
Definitely.
I thought when I started the podcast that it was just going to be like the mean girls from school listening that wanted to have the inside goss. And then I was like, I'm a bit nervous about this. I feel like my friends had never heard me talk about grief. And then suddenly I'm just like, hey guys, like, so bizarre. Like, it literally
That's
360.
mad.
It's mad, but it also shows like the power of opening yourself up to talk about it, like, and to process things and not suppress it anymore. Like, I felt like, I call it like a grief fart, to be honest. Sometimes just like talking about it is just like, get it out, because I've spent so long not talking. And if it's helping, I always said, like, if this helps one person, then it's worth it. And like, it has, and it just is so rewarding. But obviously it comes with the downside. Like, it comes with the exhaustion of, especially when I do live talks and I'm in a room with however many grieving people, like other grieving people, and like, it weighs heavy on your heart because you know how they're all feeling and it's emotional. But for the most part, it's rewarding. Because I'm a perfectionist and I want to get content out all the time, and I just need to remind myself that it's not good for me to push it. Whenever I can, I'll do it.
I find it so interesting, again, what you were saying about like weighing heavy. Like, I think sometimes, I don't know if you ever get this, but if someone's ever approached me and said, oh, I've just experienced this grief. I had it fairly recently with a friend, and I remember thinking, like, I'm placing a lot of importance on what I'm saying here, because I know what it feels like to tell someone that, and how important that feels to them to like come out and go, actually, this has happened. And it's quite a vulnerable statement sometimes. So I just wondered if you ever feel that like importance of what you're saying, because it is so important. But like the real, like you said, the heaviness, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like when you've experienced grief, like before anyone else that you know, do you feel like you kind of have a responsibility of like, oh, I'm the grief person, I can help you. And it's also like, no, like, I do that on my own kind of timeline in the way that I post my stuff, but like, also I'm very early on in my processing journey, and sometimes I'm not in the right headspace to be offering advice to people. As sure, like, same with you, like, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to provide that as a resource when first of all, I'm not a trained therapist. I've just been through grief, and it's hard when people go through it that you're close to, because it can be triggering to see them relive what you've lived. Always you need to think like, am I okay to provide this? Like, is my cup full enough to be giving it to them? Because if it's not, you're not going to be able to help them anyway. Like, you have to look after yourself first.
Yeah, God, it's tough out here.
Babe.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I was going to add on that. What me and Alicia have always said with the podcast is that it is just our experiences with grief. That is it. Like, honestly, that is all of it. We've not been trained. We're not therapists. It's just to hopefully provide people with comfort for them to be able to relate to it. And I think if you're in a position where you need to help someone, all you can do is act from your own experience. So like you can even preface it by saying that, like, I don't know, the advice that you want to give might not be right for them, but all you can do is try, and you just gotta, just be gentle with yourself, because you're not going to get it perfect just because you've been through grief.
Not to sound like a primary school teacher, but the only thing you actually can do is like treat others how you would want someone to treat you. Like,
exactly.
Which is like, shut up now, but also like so true. Like,
it's so true.
If you,
honestly, I do think the only advice with grief is like the most basic. Like, it's so complex, grief is, but the advice is so basic. It's like, treat yourself with kindness and patience. Treat others how you want to be treated. Like, it's so basic. But I don't know, or like, go outside, have a shower. Like, it is basic, but it is the only thing that works, because I guess it is so bad what's happened that all you can do is take it back to basics. As basic as the advice is, like Alicia was saying the other day about how there's loads of physical things that you can do, biting into a lemon, or like dunking your head in water, ice cold water, going outside, all of these things, like, sounds like Cam's advice, but it's literally like makes such a difference.
Yeah, like just that shock, I think, can sometimes be a bit like, oh, okay, I'm back now, like I'm out of my little rut or whatever it is going on in your brain. Like, I always find like a cold shower, I'm just like, I literally can't be sad after a cold shower, more than anything because I'm traumatised, but mostly because I'm just like, I'm always sit there like, why did I do that?
Yeah, it works.
But then I can't think of anything but how cold it is, so it's great.
Never underestimate the power of a shower. That's what I always say.
And baths, come out a new woman.
I don't think baths do the same. Baths kind of... No.
There's too much mulling over time in a bath, I think, or too much thinking. And also, you're just like... I just find baths give me the ick about myself a bit. I'm like, sometimes I'm just like that, like, okay, what? Do you know what I mean?
What do I do
just,
now?
Like, look down at yourself, you're like... But use whatever form of water you have available to you.
Yeah.
Because...
Grief advice with Amie and Nell.
And, like, I think also with nature, like, if I go for the same walk every day, which I often do because there's, like, a nice little route around my house, apart from, like, things changing, like, with the seasons, like, it kind of all stays the same, and it's all, like, just nice, and I just feel like it's really, like, simple and basic, but it's really, like, comforting. And there is something about, like... I'm actually, like, really not in anything complex right now. Like, I'm just in a load of trees, and that's really nice.
Yeah. I think it's because your brain is so messy. Your brain is, like, constantly, like, a black ball of mess. And then, like, you go out and you're just like, oh, like, the trees are still here. The people are still walking around living their life. There's kids over there playing. And it's kind of, like, a bit comforting that's, like, life just goes on. It does. And it needs you to go, you need to go with it. That's the only option. And at the start, I was like, I was fuming that the world carried on. But now I find it quite comforting because it's like, everyone has these things that happen to them and everyone just has the strength to carry on. And obviously you found that you have it. I have it. Like, do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
I think, that was so interesting what you were saying, because I was just about to say, like, I had the same thing, like, when my dad was ill and then when he died, like, I couldn't, like, go on public transport, I couldn't go for walks, I couldn't, because I was surrounded constantly by the reminder that everyone was living their life, and my world had fallen apart, and their world seemed really normal and seemed to stay the same.
Yeah.
But now I'll just be like, I probably look relatively normal on a bus, and no one is looking at me going, dad, but I'm not looking at anyone else and going, they've had something bad happen to them. So it's nice, almost that anonymous and not...
I hate this thumbs up. You were saying something really interesting.
Yeah, Zoom, what is this?
Sorry.
At least it agrees, I guess. Yeah. At least it's not a big thumbs down. That would be kind of awkward.
Broken heart.
Just a big red thumbs down. Oh yeah, like, I think it's really mad how that can move and your perspective can completely shift in the time. Like, I just never imagined doing something like this or sitting on a bus or ever just even within the most basic sense of itself, coming to terms with what happened, and then suddenly you just find that you've done that bit. Like, you've got to where you didn't think you would ever be.
Exactly.
And I think that's just like insane.
Yeah.
You see what you can do and what you can go through, and that you looked after yourself like through all of that. I think it's just like mad.
Honestly,
I just think it's so cool.
Even I think that's why in grief you need to celebrate small wins. Like, for non-grievers, celebrating having your first shower or cooking yourself your first meal, it won't make sense. But even to grieving people, like, some days obviously you can't do those things. And like you said, like going on the bus, you never thought you'd be able to do that. And like, you should celebrate that you can do that. And everyone should celebrate the small wins like that, because you really can do more than you think you can do.
Yeah, definitely. And like when you were in like the trenches, so to speak.
I love that you say the trenches. I say the trenches all the time.
Do you?
Yeah, I mean,
this is literal proof. Like at the beginning, like before the recording, we were talking about what ages we were. Yeah. And I said that we were grief soulmates. And this is just consistent proof.
Babes, where have you been all my life?
Listening to your podcast, really. Yeah, so there are so many simple things that you can do to make your grief feel a little bit lighter sometimes. And so I think not to discount those because they seem simple is really important. But yeah, thank you so much for chatting to me, Amie. I had literally the nicest time ever.
I've literally had the best time. This was my first podcast and you just made it so easy. I've loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
This is a fangirl dream come true for me. So, guys,
I'm a
please go
fangirl
and
now.
listen. Guys, please go and listen to If We Don't Laugh We'll Cry, because it is incredible. And yeah, really excited to see y'all soon. And thank you so much for listening to the Grieve and Common podcast. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Talk Grieve, powered by Winston's Wish, the UK's first children and young people's bereavement charity.
Listen to young people from different backgrounds have honest conversations about their grief and experiences.
You might hear us laugh, cry, and everything in between.
From teenagers to young adults, students to young professionals, we're all different, but we've all got grief in common. Thank you.